Welcome back into another episode of our Dynasty Nerds interview series. We have a guest that I'm thrilled to talk to today. We've got Mr. Connor Rogers himself from Bleacher Report. Connor, how you doing today?
Good, man. I'm excited for this. This is the time, or this is the kind of interview where it's like, let's talk about some players that we haven't talked about 30 million times already, and go through the 6th and 7th round impact guys. So that's kind of the point of the year it is for me, man. I'm sitting here looking at like these some undrafted potential guys, and just looking at the sleepers. So it's fun, man. It's going to be a good time.
Well, good. I'm glad, because I'm that guy too. Like, it is fun to talk about like how good could Najee Harris be, or Jamar Chase versus Devonta Smith, and like different things like that. That's a blast. But at the end of the day, like you're probably still getting a good player there, regardless who you take. So, where you can really win your drafts is those late round guys.
I mean, look at it last year, right? Like, Justin Jefferson was a round one player for a lot of people. Like, I know for me, he snuck into a first round grade for me, but like people didn't talk about Justin Jefferson as much with CD and Judy and all those guys, and even Claypool. And then you always have, we had an undrafted running back have a huge impact with the Jaguars. So like it's funny this time of year, I think some people tune it out. They're like, oh, it's too early for that. But then you fast forward a year and it's like, wow, it really did make a difference.
Absolutely. So let's get into some of the details. So we have, at least in the fantasy circle. So for some people that might not follow you as closely as I do, because I love all of your work, but we at Dynasty Nerds are obviously on the fantasy football side of things, but most of your focus is on the actual NFL side of things, the teams, who they're drafting, all of that kind of stuff. So we're kind of marrying the two worlds together when we're talking about this. But in fantasy circles, we kind of talk about Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, and Javonte Williams as the big three running backs in the class. On the NFL draft side, is that still true as well?
I think so. I think when you look at it, it's interesting to me. It's after the surface level guys, it's just not really a great draft for running backs in a sense that when you're sitting there every year, you could make your argument for players that are projected to go in the third day of the draft, not even round 3, the third day. And you go, this guy can come in and have 1,000 yards and catch a ton of passes and be the dude, and you're starting him every week and all that. Like, when I have these or try to stand on the table for one of these guys, it's hard. It's really hard. And sure, we might get one, and we're going to talk about some of them today, but I find it much more difficult this year than usual to find those guys where areas in the receiver group, it's the easiest thing in the world. So
for sure,
Najee and Etienne, they both could sneak into round 1. Teams love Javonte, where it shocked me if he wasn't a top 50 pick, just because he's a really safe prospect. And then you get, Kenny Gainwell, who I really like, Michael Carter, but it's just this wild west of running backs after those top 3.
Right. So talking about that later group then, give me a guy that is probably going to be a day 3 pick that you're like, I know you already said it's tougher this year than most years, but if you had to pick one that you would say this guy could do something on a team if the situation fell right, things like that, who would be that guy for you?
Yeah. So assuming that like Harris, Etienne, Javonte, Gainwell, and Michael Carter, let's assume they're gone in the first 3 rounds, which they should be. I think they've earned that.
Yeah.
A player that I think is going day 3 and I have not given up on yet, and it is a limited player, is Chuba Hubbard. And it's not a sleeper name.
Yeah.
He's a high profile name from a monster 2019 season. I think if he declared after 2019 and it was in last year's draft, a lot of people would have him as a top 60, top 75 pick, which for a running back is great.
Yeah.
And things with injuries, did not go well this year. I think at that program did not particularly go well this year. And I think that he did not get better in certain areas that you would like to see, most notably pass protection. He's unfortunately, one of the worst pass protecting draftable backs in this class right now.
Yeah.
But if you play the game of what he can do, you get him in an outside zone scheme. And I know everybody loves to just use the Niners over and over again, but it's the most transparent, easy example to relate to people. Look at Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, right? And you look at Chuba Hubbard, what he does well. Outside burst, foot in the ground, get upfield. And I think people will overlook him because the testing time wasn't in the 4.3s, but the man is a little different in terms of what he can do, that 50 to 60 yards. Like he really has home run speed, a sub 4.5 player, an upright runner with that lean muscular body where you do worry about the lower body injuries. But I just look at Chuba Hubbard and think like, for a player that his stock has fallen off a cliff, I've heard he can go fourth, fifth round. I think in the right system, you're not gonna ask him to pass protect a lot, but these outside runs where he creates angles and can make you miss at the second level, there's some big plays, and teams need big plays. And then you look at the other one, like, I guess, man, it's interesting. Like the deep sleeper that maybe isn't so deep. I know Sims has him running back 3. Like Javion Hawkins is a role player that also fits that mold of outside zone, 183 pounds, but he explodes. His foot in the ground, he explodes. I think he can catch the ball. I think he could be a little bit more of an offensive weapon. So they're not names that, everybody's heard of these names, but I just think that they have no real great stock value right now in this draft class and might actually make a huge impact.
Yeah, it is a weird one, and especially a class where it seems like we have a lot of undersized backs too, especially in that kind of second, third tier. A lot of these guys are sub 200 pounds. And so, that makes it tougher to project anything close to a bell cow workload. So I like the Chuba call because he at least has the frame to be able to maybe withstand some of that. And we saw he got a stupid amount of touches at Oklahoma State. So we've seen him be able to do it, but it has been sad to see how far he's fallen from grace from last season. So let's go to the quarterback position real quick, because there's 2 names I want to ask you about. This is another class. I shouldn't say another class. This is a class where we have 5 really, really good quarterbacks that, we're hearing as high as, all of them going maybe even inside the top 10. That seems wild and crazy, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. But assume all 5 of those guys are at least first round players. 2 guys that I think are interesting, and I want your thoughts on: Kellen Mond and Davis Mills. Give me your thoughts on those 2 players, because I've heard a little bit of buzz around them, but do they actually have the skills to translate to be a starting quarterback in the NFL? And will they even get drafted high enough for that to even matter?
Yeah, it's a good one, right? Because they're both talented players and they're both kind of the cutoff, right? Like you get through the obvious 5 that are probably going in the top 10. It is crazy. Kyle Trask, in that in the next tier somewhere, and Mon and Davis Mills, and then it kind of falls off a cliff, right? We didn't get a final year Jamie Newman. Maybe he could have helped himself. Sam Ellinger, Ian Book, Shane Buechele, guys like that, you're just not in that conversation. So, what's interesting with Mond and Davis Mills is it almost felt like they had the talent to play a more volatile brand of football, and they played it safe a lot, I think. And I think Mond let it go a little bit more his final year, but there was times where, you could just see that in the offense he's playing in, he doesn't always want to take these crazy chances all the time, and he can run and save himself with his legs. I look at them and, I'll pull up where I have them on the big board right now, because it's just not near where they're projected. It's Davis Mills 125 for me, and then Mond ironically 123. So right there. They're not going to go on day 3. They will probably go on day 2. So they will be, overdrafted for where I value them, but they're quarterbacks, so that's okay.
Happens every year.
I think you're looking at, the right situation for them. I look at Davis Mills and just think, man, can he go to Tennessee where they consider their situation stable at quarterback, but a player that has an injury history and an offense that can play to what we saw him do a good job of in college? You could see him roll out on boot action and throw the ball. He's not a great athlete, but the touch throwing is really, really good. I call him a poor man's Jimmy G, ironically. Like that's what he looks like to me, where it's like in the structure of the offense. I thought the timing was really good for a player that only started 11 games. That's usually something with small starter sample sizes. The timing is a problem. It wasn't for him. I just thought he couldn't play off script. And I think with the way the league's going, if you're not this overwhelmingly talented pocket passer and you don't play off script, you kind of fall into like the Jag category of like, all right, he's a guy, he could be a backup, but is he ever going to be this upside starter? And I don't think he'll be drafted to be one. Like I've heard the rumors of, maybe round 1, definitely round 2. It just seems like a round 3 to 4 player to me. And with Monde, it's a little different because at least he has the mobility.
Sure.
And you see some crazy velocity on the passes. Like the intermediate passes have some wild velocity. The turnovers went down in 2020. you can get really creative with him in the red zone as
Yep.
on RPOs, as a runner, on cutting the field, and giving him the option to go, giving him the option to, check down when he gets out of the pocket. So at least there's a little more on the table where you can get creative with Monde. I think that's why I liked him a little bit more than Davis Mills. But, he's a guy with a big arm, and some reason the deep ball sails. It floats. And that's frustrating to me. So I just look at them and think they're, in a sense, project quarterbacks because, it's funny. Kellen Monde has a ton of play experience, and he did get better this year. But I just don't think he's ready to be a starter in any sense. And I don't think he's proven that he will be this – high upside starter yet, but at least the tools are there. With Davis Mills, I didn't see that. I saw long-term backup. You call him a poor man's Jimmy G, and that kind of tells the story of it.
Sure.
So I think we're at the point of the class where we always, I don't want to say we, because I'm trying to not be guilty of it lately. I used to be years ago. You get guilty of trying to squeeze a little bit more out of the quarterback class than that's there. We got 5 good quarterback prospects. That's great, right?
Yeah.
And Kyle Trask, not a bad player. He's
Sure.
outside that top 5, but not a terrible player. And then you got these other 2 guys. And it's it seems like we people in the media get into this habit of how can we build a little more hype around them?
Sure.
And that's kind of the point we're at in the draft with those 2.
And I think it's tough when you see, about once every 3 years, you have a Kirk Cousins, a Dak Prescott, a Russell Wilson that falls in that range and then bursts out that we want one of those every year. We want one of those guys every year, and they're just not always there.
And how many Bryce Petty's or, on and on. There's one.
Will Greer.
Yeah, Will Greer, Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah.
It's really one of these things where there's millions of them that don't end up doing anything. And just the law of averages. Do we think 8 quarterbacks are going to come out as starters in this class? I'm going to go
legendary.
Yeah, right. It would be unheard of. It would be unheard of times 2. I'm going to go with the 4 guys that have just all-world traits and bet on them making it out. And even then, some of them probably won't. It's crazy.
Right. All right. Let's who's a guy right now that we're looking at as 6th, 7th, maybe even undrafted at any of our fantasy relevant positions? So quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, that you're like, you know what? No one's talking about this guy. He's not going to have the draft capital that you want, but I like what I see on tape.
Yeah, it's Antonio Nunn for me from Buffalo. It's, you look beyond it and you sit there and go, okay, he's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy, but he's passes the threshold. He can run. It's not oh man, 4.65, nothing like that. But he played in an offense where he's not going to have big numbers. Buffalo does not throw the ball. And
give it to Jared Patterson, man.
Give it to Jared Patterson and get out of the way. And the quarterback, when he does throw the ball, was not very good. And I think when you look at it, Nunn does a lot of things that will get on the coach's good side in training camp where it's I don't even know if he'll be drafted. I think he will because I just think the film is too good. And I think that he should be drafted. And the problem is when you're taking in the 5th, 6th, 7th round or undrafted, are you getting the opportunities you deserve? But why I think he can overcome those odds is he catches everything. He's got strong hands. He's got late hands. So he could trick DBs into not playing the ball. He's a really hard-nosed, prideful blocker. It takes a lot of pride in blocking.
I'm writing this name down as you're talking because I haven't watched any tape on him yet. So I need to get it in.
And he just impressed me at both years, 2019, 2020. And I think that he does a lot of things that coaches will just love. And he can slowly work his way up into this wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 role that you feel good about him being a possession guy. And a lot of people love to go, well, he played in the MAC. What's the competition? Well, in 2019, he tore Penn State alive, tore him alive. And it's okay, so he's running by good athletes. We know what kind of athletes Penn State has on the field. He's blocking. He's just doing everything you ask of him. So I don't see Nunn anywhere. I don't see him on, expected to be drafted list. He didn't get a combine invite, which is always the big alarming sign.
Sure.
And I think he's the player poised to overcome all those odds.
Yeah. I've watched about 40 receivers tape and I have not watched his yet. So now I'm oh crap, I got to get this in before the draft.
Yeah. You got time.
Now I know in our league who you're going to be taking in the 5th round now. So now
giveaway.
This was all a ploy just to know who you were taking. All right. A guy that I really like, and I want your honest opinion, because you might be like, you know what, this dude's trash and I don't like him. But a name that isn't a big name. I watched him play at the Senior Bowl. I was really impressed with some of the things. I thought he has good, typical X receiver size. Gets in and out of his breaks really low. Pretty loose hips. Well, I shouldn't say loose hips, but he got in and out of his breaks really well. Decent speed, strong hands. It's Austin Watkins Jr.
I could have guessed that. Isn't that
good?
crazy?
Okay, don't burst my bubble.
The Senior Bowl was a little bit of the giveaway but go on.
Yeah, no, as I was breaking him down, it wasn't a name that I heard a ton outside of like, oh, he's Sammy's cousin. That was really like all I heard about him. But when I watched his tape and when I watched him at the Senior Bowl, I was blown away. I think he's a guy right now that I have, as far as our nerd score, which is basically our tape grades. I have him pushing that top 10 in the class. Am I crazy? Tell me I'm crazy.
No, I mean, number one, this is one of the second hardest wide receiver class we've ever had to stack. Last year, I thought was really difficult. This one actually might be not as deep in terms of talent, but harder to stack, because I think the distance between the guys outside of round one is just, it doesn't really exist, right? Like it took more work than ever to find it. So with Watkins, I have him 178. And I wrote down, I do a best trait category in my doc.
Sure.
And I wrote down catch radius. And the guy's catch radius is just absurd. And it's one-handed catches. It's contested catches.
Yeah.
It's all things like that, where there's just a place for a guy like that in the league. And I even, might be low on him in a sense that, like, you're right. The Senior Bowl film was really, really good. And I think that he's more reliable. Like, I have him over Daz Newsome. I have him over Trey Nixon. Like, I have him over players like that in this receiver class. And I had like over 30 draftable, which is just stupid. Honestly, it's crazy. I think he's a safer player than a lot of the guys that, are going to be regarded ahead of him. Like Amir Smith-Marset, who I really, really like. Josh Palmer, I like. Cade Johnson, Tamarin Terry, Matter Bebe. Like, those guys have some really wild traits at some point or do something special, but Watkins is just more reliable player. So I could see why you like him. And I think the player like that always fascinates me, because you might sit there and look at him and say like, oh, I have him in, what is it, the 5th round right now, or end of 5th, early 6th, whatever it is. And then he goes to like Seattle. And it's like, oh, there's a clear path for him to be the number 4 in an offense that the ball should get to him on broken down plays. And so your opinions can really change after the draft, especially in this league where coaching matters so much nowadays.
Right.
So I don't think you're nuts at all. I think Austin Watkins has been a nice player. And I just think that, something that I think does translate to the next level over and over again is that catch radius ability, because there's just days in the NFL you're not going to get open. Like, you're going to be against a corner that can stay in your hip pocket, or they're scheming against you. And the question is, can you still affect the game? And I think one of his calling cards is he does affect the game in that way.
Well, you were talking about Nunn earlier in his big game against Penn State. And it was when I watched Watkins against Miami, that was what really sold me. Saw him. It was only 3 catches, 32 yards and a touchdown, but consistently getting open, making difficult catches. And when you see him go against, the tougher, the bigger schools, that always gives me a little boost of confidence that, he can do it at a little bit higher level than maybe some of the guys that I would have in the same tier. So, all right, I feel better now that you've affirmed my bias already. So
it's most of my job is talking people off the ledge. Like, even after the draft, like, we always have to pick winners and losers. And it pains me to pick a loser, because then that fan base, if they're not just cursing at me in the Bleacher Report app or on Twitter, they're like, man, like, why didn't, like, I'm sad now after you said that. And I'm just like, well, here's why it might work. Like, I don't want to be like
just saying there's a chance.
The 3 days of the draft, I grew up a Jets fan. So I was in the Meadowlands and I was like, could barely walk. I know what it's like the draft is your favorite day of the year as a football fan. Like, I think that, a lot of drafting comes down to development and situation. And we're in a time where players definitely fail in their own way. Like, that could be a work ethic thing. Sometimes you just don't have the talent to be one of the best athletes in the world.
Sure.
But more often than not, and we're going to see it with these quarterbacks taken, all 5 of them, the landing spot is just so vital.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So as a Jets fan, quick tiny detour. As a Jets fan, who's your guy at 2? Who do you want?
You know what? It was really difficult, and it's not like I just jumped on it because I know they're taking them. Like back in November, December, I sat there and got through the all 22 I had of Zach Wilson, and I was like, man, there's just something special about the way this guy throws the ball and makes plays. And I think I could have easily been talked to any of the 4. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, QB1. But this is the first. I don't particularly like ranking quarterbacks high because they play quarterback. Like I remember even the year it was a Goff and Wentz year. Like I had Wentz like 13 and I loved him. Thought he was like a good player. I was like, but he's still 13th best player in the class.
Right.
And then even the year 2018, like I had none of the guys as the number 1 overall player. I had Baker and Rosen somewhere in the top 10 and then Lamar. But then I had like Darnold at the end of round 1. Everyone's like, this guy's supposed to be the next Andrew Luck. And I'm like, he's a good player, but he's a prospect. Like, so for me to sit here and say I have Trevor Lawrence 1, Zach Wilson 3, Penei Sewell 2, Fields at 4, and Trey Lance at 5, like it's a special group that you could have easily talked me into any of the 4.
Sure.
But I understand why they're taking Zach Wilson. Like they need a quarterback that on the move is special. The vertical passing is special. But most importantly, that lightning release.
So quick.
It's so quick that the ball is going to get to – they're coming from LaFleur followed Shanahan everywhere. They care more about, can you get the ball to where I coach you to get the ball rather than everything else. And they think that Zach Wilson can do that. And I understand why they think they can coach him to being that guy. So, outside of some injury concerns, it's hard to, and people are definitely hating on it. But I don't think it's a pick that can be slammed in any way.
I wish I could remember who it was, but there was somebody I was listening to. It might have been Bucky Brooks, or I don't remember who it was. But somebody comped Zach Wilson to Omar Vizquel, like the former shortstop for the Indians. And I was like, yeah, I get that.
Just smooth, man. Yeah, it's, a really smooth thrower. A smooth athlete. I mean, the upper body mechanics are like, it's so fluid, everything he does, even when he doesn't set his feet or play with his base. A body type like that, I'll never understand how he throws the ball with as much velocity and as far as he can, but he does it, and it's pretty jaw-dropping at times.
All right, let's get to a position real quick that most people don't get as excited about, but this year there's a little more buzz around the position because of Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is the man. Everybody loves Kyle Pitts. And then we got Freiermuth and Jordan kind of after them. But who's a guy that, day 3, that a tight end that might end up gaining some steam, could get with a team and quickly earn themselves a regular role that could be relevant for fantasy football?
Man, this tight end class it's rough, right? Like it really is. And I think that it's even more rough for fantasy football because sure, you love Pitts, right? Blue chip player or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And Freiermuth, you see the fit probably somewhere in round 2. Brevin, kind of that Irv Smith kind of player. You see the fantasy relevance with him. And then you get into it and it's like I don't see Hunter Long as this fantasy relevant tight end. I love Tommy. I love Tommy Tremble, but Tommy Tremble is more of like a, this blocking, juice check, like the things that Tommy Tremble will be for the all 22 guys clipping out the dirty work, not for the fantasy waiver wire guys year 1. So, and then on day 3, Trey Mckitty, I think Trey's a good blocker and has soft hands. Yeah. A team's not going to draft Trey and be like, hey, catch 50 balls this year.
Right.
So the only guy that I could even really think of having that chance is Kenny Yeboa, right? Because he's like the Brevin Jordan light in a sense. Like you see the receiving ability up the seam. You see he could be used in different ways. You see that he's more of that pass catching tight end. You don't want him to come in and just be this hey, block. Don't ask him to do that. Just have him run the seam.
Don't even ask.
It's tight end classes. It's brutal.
It gets brutal. Rough real quick.
I can't even get myself juiced up over a lot of guys on day 3, but Yeboa is at least one that I think is draftable, and you like the receiving relevance with him.
Well, it was tough because guys like Kohler and I'm an Ohio State fan. I can't even think of their tight end, but Ruckert. Kohler and Ruckert decided to go back to school. So, those were going to be hopefully some of those like mid-tier guys before you get to the yuck. And
Bushman got hurt at BYU. Got hurt,
yep.
It's like, what is that going to look like?
I would have loved to have seen him with Zach Wilson.
Exactly. It really, and then you could start to see, a lot of what people think the Jets offense will be with the middle of the field throwing. That would have been Bushman's spot. So, because I know some people are like, well, Wilson isn't this overwhelming, sample size of a middle of the field thrower. It's like, well, he lost what a lot of people thought was one of the best tight ends in the country. So, yeah, this tight end class took some sucker punches, and it's tough to. Man, if you needed one and you're not getting Kyle Pitts, like it's a gamble.
All right. Well, one last question before we get out of here. Is there any other name that just isn't on radars, but you're like, I need to put it on the video. I need to put it on tape. So that way I at least spoke it. And if it blows up, then I got it right on tape. Is there any of those guys you want to throw out there real quick?
Man, it's tricky, right? Like in the running back group, not really. Everybody knows the names. Like everybody should be high on Trey Sermon if he stays healthy. Everyone knows that, but like we just don't know if he'll stay healthy. I understand why people will, Elijah Mitchell has some talent. He'll probably go in the 6th round, something like that. I look at the wide receiver class and like I try to get like, psyched up about one of these guys. I said Amir Smith-Marset. I think he has a lot of talent. I think Simi Fehoko from Stanford has a lot of talent and size. Josh Palmer is getting a lot of love, but I don't think he's a sleeper. Everyone knows Cade Johnson. Yeah, it's interesting to me. Like it's who is really going to be the difference maker. I don't see anyone ever talk about Sage Sarat, which is bizarre. Like
he was like a darling a year or two ago, and then he just kind of fell off the face of the earth.
And I mean, he's probably a reason that like you watch Jamie Newman at Wake Forest and you sit there and you're like, man, like Sage Sarat could bail guys out. It's actually like really impressive how often he could do it. And maybe people have cooled on him as I pull up the athletic profile on Sarat. And maybe people have cooled on him because it's like,
what do you run, like a 4.64 or something like that?
A 4.7 apparently, which is like undraftable. So like at that point, you almost got to wonder, like, can somebody get him up to 230 and have him be like a move tight end H-back kind of piece at 4.7?
I'd be much more interested in at that position.
Yeah, same. So this is my problem. Like I'm talking up, like Sarat is maybe a guy but he's like undraftable at that 40. So it's tough, man. It's really tough. I think that, Nunn is the guy I'd carry the flag for.
All right. I love it.
Out of the guys that I think just people don't ever mention. And that's where the running backs will be landing spot based. Like you look at the teams, like the Jets really don't have a starting running back right now. There's plenty of teams that can really.
Miami could maybe use
and they might use a premium pick on one. The Steelers might use
Buffalo.
They might take Najee, Buffalo. So you look at that and you sit there and go like, okay, at least some of these guys will get some relevance because of where they play. The Falcons, too.
Yeah, Falcons, absolutely. All right, well, we're gonna get out of here. Before we do, Connor, tell us what you're up to right now. Anything else you want to plug? Anything you have going on?
Yeah, I mean, the Bleacher Report live show is where it's at right now for us. We announced that, Aqib Talib will be my co-draft analyst.
I saw that. I was so jealous.
Man, it's cool. Going to be awesome to work with him. And he's going to be breaking down the first 3 rounds, every pick with us, which is amazing. Me, him, Adam Lefko on the desk. But, it's a little different this year. Like we got position specialists where you get a little bit more analysis. Like RG3 will comment on every quarterback pick, or Reggie Wayne will break down every receiver that's picked. And Cam Jordan on night 1 will do all the offensive and defensive linemen. Like that to me is interesting. Like I always loved growing up watching ESPN. I think the NFL Network does a great job. But like we're a streaming broadcast, right? Whether it's on the BR app, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Twitter, however you want to watch. Like if you're looking for a second screen, give it a shot. And I think you'll get, since we don't have like TV responsibilities, right? No commercial breaks. Like we get to talk about the players more. So I'm excited to see how many people tune in and where our show continues to grow this year.
Well, I'm excited. I didn't know about Reggie Wayne and RG3 and all those guys. So they got me even more excited. That's going to be awesome. Well, Connor, I really appreciate you coming on, spending all this time talking the NFL draft with us, and we'll talk to you later, man.
Thanks for having me, dude.